in the last 3 years for admission to the developmental center. We looked at all of the people, and it was over 600. We looked at all of the people that were in state locked or delayed egress mental health facilities in the community, and we looked at all of the people that were placed out of state. And we then said, what do we know about these people? We looked at what behaviors they had. A very large percentage of them were on psychotropic medications, one or more. Many of them had been involved in the criminal justice system. A significant number, to flip to my charts, it actually has the information. So we looked at all of those characteristics, and then when we went to the work group meetings, one of the things that we were talking about is, so what is it that we could be doing in the community where we might be able to serve these people? And we're looking internally at how do we, for example, provide services that might be supportive? Are there things that we could do that are more crisis in nature, more short-term in nature, so somebody doesn't come in and stay 30, 40, 50 years, but comes in and stays a month or two while they stabilize, because we can get federal money there instead of being locked in a mental health hospital. We talked about having regional resources, or better determination of regional resources, because every community may not need a home for Prater Willies. We may only need a few homes for that. So how do we identify what are the needs regionally and share among regional centers? We talked about medication regime reviews, because you have a lot of people on numerous psychotropic medications. And when you see Joni Pepper, who was up here, it brings tears to my eyes. One of the things that she didn't talk about today was her son. When his medications were changed in the community, she walked in the home and he began speaking to her for the first time in a very, very long time, because somebody had looked at all of the medications at once and tried to determine what was best. So we're trying to look at that. We're trying to determine whether or not our facilities could be used in a different way. So we've got a lot of work to be done between now and May Revise, but we're trying to figure out, not only are you looking at closing a facility, but if you're putting 100 plus people in a year, your net effect is 100 versus 200 plus. So we need to figure out how not to have people coming in. We do have challenges with people involved in the criminal justice system, and we have a cap at Porterville behind the fence right now. We've got about 17 people waiting at jail, they're all jail, they're all adults. We're waiting to come to us to restore competency. One of the things we're looking at is, can you restore competency some other way in the community? Why do you have to go to a locked facility to restore competency? So these are the different types of things with the expertise or the people in the community trying to learn. One of the things that we heard a lot is, the rates being depressed for so long makes it harder for people who used to be able to serve this community to be able to continue serving them. So we've got to look at that. We've got to figure out how we make it work. But I think we've got both coming and going issues as to how to do it better.
Thank you. Ms. Grove?
Thank you, and I really do appreciate the chair's indulgence, because, like I said, I was bouncing back and forth. Going back to a testimony that was, and I didn't have this question until I listened to public testimony, they mentioned the difference in cost between behavioral homes and medical homes. What's the difference in cost between behavioral homes? I know there's 2-on-1s, 3-on-1s, things like that, but what's the difference in cost? And are we allocating and allowing for those costs?
In the behavioral homes, and they're specialized residential homes, and they were created not just for the closure of Agnew's, they were being created in the community going back some time. They were negotiated rate homes that were above what's set in statute for regular community homes. Those homes have any number of things. They may be, for lack of a better term, fortified, so they don't have glass that people can break. They may have doors that are, or walls that are handled differently so people can't hurt themselves. They typically have a smaller number of clients living there. Typically it's 2 or 3 people living there, and they almost always have higher staffing ratios in the homes as well to deal with people with very significant behavioral issues.
Okay, and then you brought up the Senate hearing that you had yesterday, and I know that's issue 3 and 5, so I'll wait to ask that question when I get to that. We get to that. I guess going back or staying on issue 2. Let me look at my notes here. I apologize. So, okay, I'm done with issue 2, but going back to issue 1, which was the overview, and which I was able or not able to participate in, and I apologize for that again. We required many community-based providers that certify they spend no more than 15% of state funding on administration cost, and what that administration cost is very specific. like I looked on the website, and it seems like to me that when I look at state agencies, it's basically listed as Category 1, Category 2. But I go to a private agency or a community agency, and it seems like to me they have to list even the cost of the minute expenses that they expend. When these regional centers, or these 21 regional centers that you work with or contract with, considered stakeholders, provide, again, direct delivery of care services to the individual. So I guess can developmental centers comply with these requirements that are required for the community services? And if so, is that going to be available online so that if I go click on what Category A has been spending, it's not in a group dollar amount, it's identified as staff, wages, benefits, paper pens, whatever. Is there a way to break that down?
I'm not exactly certain, Assemblywoman Grove, what you were looking at, but the answer to your question is yes, that we can tell you what we're spending on direct care versus what we're spending administrative. The last time we looked, it was around 12%, but the Senate asked us to do a breakdown as well, so we're doing a breakdown. Direct care includes providing direct services, and we met with a number of provider groups after that was put in place last year to make sure that they understood what was administrative and what was direct services, and I think that was very helpful to many of them because I think they were putting indirect services into administrative. So we've tried to address a number of those concerns. But yes, I believe we do live within it. I believe we're actually below it, but we're going back and looking at each of the positions so that we can show where that's at.
Would you mind providing a copy of that to my office?
Absolutely.
As well?
We can provide it to the committee as well, and they can get it to all the members.
You just mentioned again the stakeholder process. Describe to me the stakeholder process that you participated in last year, because I'm understanding a lot of stakeholders were not, it was kind of like, this is the way we're doing it, and have a happy day, basically. I want to know that stakeholders had an opinion, a voice, and that because they are the ones that, like I said, are delivering direct care of services at a reduced cost, that they can't afford to cut any more. On their direct services. And I hate to think that all the cuts are going to direct services instead of the bureaucracy. So how did you administer that stakeholder meeting?
We've actually done 3 different stakeholder processes over time. The first time we did the stakeholder process, we asked each statewide organization to appoint somebody. They had somebody come in. We had many, many days and hours. All the legislative staff were invited to participate, so they were open to have people there, and your staff did. The last year, because the cut was so large, we actually, instead of having one representative of each of the organizations come in, we asked each of the organizations to designate their own representatives, and we had 8 different work groups. So we had a work group on supported and independent living. We had a work group on residential care. We had a work group on autism, or early start, and autism and behavioral services, healthcare services. So we had 8 individual work groups that came together. Each work group met for 2 full days for 16 hours. Everybody was appointed by somebody other than me. They sent who they wanted to be there. There were probably 50-plus people that sat on each work group, and then legislative staff participated as well. This year, because we were looking at statewide issues, not as large as they were last year, and issues such as the 4.25%, which affected everybody, the difficult to serve, which affected everybody, is that we asked each of the groups to appoint representatives for 6 statewide groups. We went all around the state. One of the complaints we heard last year was we only did them in Sacramento, so this year we did them all over the state. We did them in Sacramento. We did it in Oakland, San Diego, Riverside, Los Angeles, and Fresno. And we actually had a lot of participation. You did hear Jackie say their organization decided to send the same people to every work group meeting. Most of the organizations did not. We had family members, we had consumers, we had providers, we had parents, we had regional centers. So it was a very wide group of people that participated in all of the meetings. So we've had a very open and collaborative stakeholder process. We've also taken input from anybody that wants to give us input. The first time around, we took every comment and gave it to the work group. We said, this is everything we've heard from everybody. You go through and you tell us what are things that you don't ever want to talk about, what are things that only if you have to, and what are things you think we should start with. They sorted those themselves, not us. Okay. In all of these work groups, all of the work groups today, we have basically taken recommendations that we've heard from the work group meetings.
Okay.
And we've tried to move forward with them. And, while I know some people would prefer that there not be cuts, I as well. I don't know if you were here when Assemblymember Chesborough said he knows when I took this job, I never thought I was coming in to dismantle this organization in any way, shape, or form. And this budget for all of us has just been awful. For all of us. And, we've tried to bring the community in as much as we can. We don't start the year and say, we're cutting 10% of our services. We start the year by saying, this is the target. Come help us try to figure out the least adverse impact. And it's been spread. We've had cuts across our entire system. We've had additional federal money. Luckily, we've been able to bring in significant new federal money as well that's offset the general fund cuts.
Okay, so I guess the 4.2.
Ms. Grove, if I could just get a sense of how many more questions you have. If you've noticed we're losing members from the audience, I'm receiving notes up here. People are having tight time constraints and they're here to testify on particular issues. So just give me a sense of how many more questions you have. So
Four on this issue.
All on the overview?
All on the overview issue 1 and 2 that I missed.
You've got to go to Education Committee. Are you able to come back?
I was supposed to be there at 4:30. It's like,
and
or excuse me, 3:30. I was supposed to be there at 3:30.
And do you plan on coming back?
Yes, I do.
If you would allow us to move on to vote only, do you intend to vote on the vote onlys?
I do intend to vote.
I want to get to the next issue so I can hear as much public comment as possible. We've already lost almost half the audience.
Okay.
I'm just trying to manage our time well.
I do appreciate that, and I'm really sorry that I'm back and forth. I just had a lot of questions, and as you can tell with my tone and my questions, my main concern is that if cuts take place, that I do not in any way, shape, or form want them to go to direct delivery of services. In private business, if we take a cut, I don't let my receptionist go that meets and greets the people, and we take it from upper level management. So my concern is that the top is growing, but the bottom is shrinking, and that the bottom is what gives direct delivery of care to individuals that not only pay, that are entitled to these services, that on a moral and ethical obligation, we're obligated to make sure they get taken care of in this way.
Yes, and okay. Assemblywoman Grove, I really appreciate your comments, and we also want to keep the cuts as far as we possibly can away from the consumers, and no area of our system's growing. No area, every part of our system. Even at headquarters, we currently have the same number of staff we had 20 years ago, and our budget's grown 400%. And no area, we're not asking for new staff, no area is growing.
So nobody's received increase in salaries or raises since you've been appointed at 2006?
Has anybody, in terms of within state government?
Yes.
Within state government, there have been increases since 2006, and there have been increases in the community since 2006. There was a 23% increase in one area.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to our vote only. And Ms. Grove is going to, if you have to leave, you'll come back, and we will get to your questions before the hearing is over. But I need to try to manage the agenda. So we're going to transition over to vote only items, and then we will come back to issue 3, community service budget. We'll move over to page 19 in the agenda. Item 4300, Department of Developmental Services. So issue 1, DDS headquarters budget and request for positions. It's the chair's recommendation that we approve the requested funding and position authority.
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Mitchell?
Aye.
Mitchell, aye. Chesbrough?
Aye.
Aye. Grove? No. Grove, no. Mansour? Monin?
Aye.
Monin, aye. Has 3.
It passes out with 3 votes. Issue 2, budget bill language to assist with cash flow. It's the chair's recommendation that the subcommittee approve the requested budget bill language to increase the authority for DDS's cash flow borrowing. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Mitchell?
Aye.
Chesbrough?
Aye.
Grove? Mansour? Monin?
Aye.
Has 4.
It's out with 4. Thank you. Issue 3, financial management services for participant-directed services. Chair recommends that the subcommittee approve the proposed increase in funding. So moved.
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Chesbro,
Aye.
Grove. Grove not voting. Mansour, Mounting
Aye.
has 3.
That's out with 3. Issue 4, capital outlay requests. Chair's reco that we approve proposed reappropriation of funding for construction of the new main kitchen at Porterville. This authorization does not alter the anticipated overall cost of the project.
Second.
Roll call.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Chesbro,
Aye.
Grove, Mansour, Mounting
Aye.
has 4.
That was the 2. I'm sorry, there was a 2-parter. So let me just do the second one separately. It was a part of that same issue 4 capital outlay request. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to break it up. So the second recommendation is approval for requests for funds for construction costs associated with installation of automatic fire sprinkler systems at specified DCs.
Second.
Roll call.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Chesbro,
Aye.
Grove, Mansour, Mounting
Aye.
has 4.
That's out with 4. Thank you very much. We'll move back to issue number 3, community services budget. We'll get the 11-12 budget updates, 12-13 budget updates, update in the 4.25% payment reduction, and first 5 funding.
Madam Chair and members, the budget for the current year that was enacted for the community is $3.98 billion, $2.3 billion general fund. The revised budget for the current year is down $146 million, as I mentioned before. That includes the $100 million trigger, which we'll talk about in a minute, that is not directly coming from the community. In many cases, it's additional federal money, and also the change for the adult day health care. The budget year is $4.06 billion, $2.3 billion general fund, and that's an increase from the revised budget of $225 million. Total funds $181 general. That does represent an increase in population of 6,232 individuals over the current year. The significant changes in the budget year are the continuation of the trigger for $200 million, as we discussed a little bit ago. Also, $158 million for restoration of the 4.25% payment reduction for regional center operations and services, and the $162.6 million associated with caseload increases. The other thing that is assumed in the budget year is that the $50 million that we have received in the prior 2 years and hope to receive in the current year from the First 5 Commission, Prop 10, in the budget year, it's assumed that it would be backfilled with general fund. The next issue that you'd requested that I speak about is the 4.25% payment reduction. As I mentioned earlier, the payment reduction started in February 2009 at 3%. In July of 2010, it was increased to 4.25%. Again, the budget assumes the sunset of it, also assuming that we can come up with the $200 million in savings. As I just mentioned, in response to questions from Assemblywoman Grove, we did have a very aggressive stakeholder process. We have completed all of the stakeholder hearings. We did it in about a 5-week period of time. We did have some people who attended all of them, but most of the people were different at each of them. We did receive a lot of input. The system has clearly faced a number of reductions, as we've talked about, and I talked about in my opening today. We've made nearly 50 changes since 9/10. We went about it different than doing across the board huge cuts. We went about it by identifying a lot of things to spread this across our system. It's included payment reductions, eligibility changes, suspended services, cap services, new federal funding, standards for behavioral services, new service delivery options, administrative efficiencies, new parental responsibility and verifying delivery of services. It's included changes in family fees, and, as we talked about earlier. I don't think we can isolate specifically when you look at the impact on our system as it has been going back to the early 2000s. I don't think you can isolate specifically the impact of the 4.25. What I can tell you is that it has impacted across our system combined with everything else. I think that that regional centers have used a variety of approaches in dealing with it. They've reduced work days. They've had furloughs, hiring freezes. They've renegotiated contracts. They've had higher caseloads. I think the families obviously were impacted by their eligibility and services. They were impacted by the rate freezes and the workload that they had to, that increased for them in terms of responsibilities. Each provider is situated differently, and this has had a different impact on them. I think you'll hear from some today. I can tell you from what we've heard from them, I think most hoped that it was, as we did, a temporary reduction when it first started, and some were able to deal with that because they may have had reserves or they had increased fundraising. I think the longevity of the payment reduction has really impacted them. They have indicated that they've had hiring freezes, they've had pay reductions, that they have people at minimum wage that they are losing that because they can no longer pay for their health care. They've had shortened days. They've also had furloughs. Again, some did tap into their reserves. Some have tapped out their reserves. I think, as I mentioned, many of them banked on the fact that it was going to end, and I've heard pretty consistently in most of the work group activity that people would prefer that it did end. I do have to say that we did hear from people throughout the work group process that recommended that if the choices are to impact services versus continue the 4.25, there was a small minority of people who recommended that we continue the 4.25% payment reduction if those were the options that were available to them. We were asked as to how we monitor the system and what the impact has been, and we have a number of ways that we monitor the system. I can't, again, tell you down to the 4.25 impacted this provider this way. We look at our consumers at risk. Have we seen an increase in the number of significant incident reports? Providers report and regional centers report to us significant incidents, including, for example, crimes that happen in community facilities or somebody gets injured in the community or goes to the hospital. That is reported to us. The number and the rate of reports is looked at each quarter, and when we look back to 2008, it's been fairly static. It's consistent. So we're not seeing a change in that. We also look at our families getting the services that they need. We look at, are we getting more fair hearings? We did have a significant increase in fair hearings after the 9/10 trailer bill language, which is the one that suspended services and also capped respite. We had a large number of fair hearing increases. However, in 11-12 and in the current year, it has gone down substantially. 10-11 dropped 67% from 9-10, and this year we're only at 40%, and we're 3/4 into the year. We also look at our services available. So we looked at the number of providers that we have, and we looked at both family providers and vendors, and in each of the service categories. We have seen since 2008 a drop of about 7% in vendors. When we look at where the drops are, they have been largely in family and in the services that were suspended, such as camping. Camping had a significant drop. We did find in other provider types, we had an increase of providers in day programs of 3%, in infant development 2%, supported living was up 6%. Community care facilities were down 2%, but specialized residential was up 17%. So those are the specialized homes. They were up as well. We did find social recreation services, which were suspended, were down 34%, music therapy down 57%, and camping down 70%, which is consistent with what was enacted in 9/10. We've also seen, for lack of a better term, service level creep in the sense of lower cost services are becoming less and less available, and they're moving to higher cost. It's more visible in the area of residential and the community care facilities. The entry level, level 2 and 3 facilities have dropped dramatically. We don't have as many as we used to, and we're seeing an increase in the 4I, or the 4s, which are the higher level within community care, has gone up dramatically as well. I think that's an indication indication of the strain in the community and the fact that people can't open homes at the lower rates. And that ultimately has an adverse fiscal effect on the state because we're paying at a higher rate than maybe we would need to if we had adjusted that. We also look at our services received. So we looked at the number of consumers that are receiving services. We looked at changes from 9/10 to 10/11 over 1 year. We did see an increase in the number of consumers receiving services. We'll have to go back in to determine whether or not it's consistent with caseload. Most of the caseload increase are babies coming in, so you'd have to ferret it out by age, which we did not have time to do. We also have health and safety exemptions available that have been available even before I arrived at the department that allow for exemptions to rate freezes that exist. The number of health and safety requests have not really increased much. We did see a little bit of an increase this year, mostly related to individuals moving from Lanterman, when we had very few health and safety requests for 4.25 exemptions. So they weren't coming. They come from the provider to the regional center. The regional center has to justify them to the department that there is a health and safety risk in order for a rate increase to occur. And out of fairness to the regional centers, we've been a bit of sticklers, obviously recognizing the tight fiscal situation, but we have approved health and safety requests as well. So I think on the 4.25, the last item you have in this agenda item was Prop 10. I mentioned that a minute ago. We have received $50 million from the First Five Commission for the prior 2 years, and we're hoping to get it again this year. It's included in our budget. At this moment, we believe we'll be on their agenda in April. So we're looking forward to getting that resolved. And the services that we use the money for are services to children 0 to 5 years of age. They're primarily in our Early Start program, and they include specialized therapeutics, speech therapy, parent support, occupational therapy, DAPE-type programs. We were audited, which is a requirement of Prop 10 on our 910 money, and they found no problems.
LAO.
LaShawn Francis, LAO. We recommend the legislature and the department consider the 4.25% provider payment reduction as an option to achieve savings. And we also agree with the department in trying to seek First Five funding.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the committee? All right, they're queued up already. Public comment. Again, please, 2 minutes.
Members, my name is Connie Lapin, and I'm here on behalf of the Autism Society of LA and my son Sean, who's 44. I do want to say I think you would see more people here like last year, but I think lots of people, it's hard to get up here, as you know, and they're waiting to see, the lady on the stage singing where the cuts are. I always want to come here to say, because my son's 44, that we were here before there was education in the Lanterman Act, where our people and people in this room would have been warehoused and had forced medication, which unfortunately I think happens today. And they were disenfranchised and dehumanized. But we're not giving up hope, but hope isn't a plan. And so I want to begin with my ending, but I'm still going to take my 2 minutes. John Wooden, a basketball coach, said, if you don't have time to do it right, when do you have time to do it over? And so I want to keep that in mind as we listen to what the recommendations are. Number one, I'm looking at friends up there. And so you know what a budget is. It isn't just numbers. It's a powerful philosophical policy statement. And I'm sure people have said to you, and they'll probably say it today, don't tell me where your priorities are, show me where you spend your money, and then I'll tell you where your priorities are. One of my complaints, because I only have 2 minutes, is what we're doing with cost-effective accountability. We have to be accountable. The feds say we have to be accountable. We have to maintain safeguards, necessary safeguards. But when we use wasteful processes like, and I'm getting encouraged that maybe this will go away, the supported living independent assessor that costs $3 million, which is not saving the money that it's projected, I want that to go away. So what do we know? We know that there's been denial by delay still, and there's been drastic unintended consequences. We're shaky out there, but I think we're more than shaky. When we have a Sunnyvale mom who fatally shoots her son and then takes her own life, That's a big message. Granted that you could say that was one incident, but how old was her son? 22 years old, right when he's going to have a life as an adult, and they were desperate. There is forced medication. You're going to hear about a case soon, I think, about over-medication. That's what you do when you don't have funding for staff and you make cuts. So the solution is to restore the 4.25%, have a viable self-determination project, legislation and services, and use supported living so that we don't have all those people going back in the DCs or readmitting people to the DCs. We want to maximize the Medicaid waiver, and there's a parent that did her own survey and found that her friends, so many of her moms, their children were not on the waiver, and the reason they weren't on the waiver, there were so many reasons that weren't accurate. They need information. So again, keep the cuts away from the kids and be our advocates. Thank you.
Thank you. Just for everyone's kind of calibration, that was 3 minutes. 2 minutes, please. Thank you.
Carlene Holden with Easter Seals. We have submitted written testimony, and I'd just like to reinforce a few points. We are, of course, in favor of sunsetting the 4.25, and it's been a long time, and it's desperately needed. I'd also like to take a look on the savings plan for $200 million and focus your attention on deflection. I think that it was a consensus opinion that we could really save a fair amount of money, both save personal suffering as well as do the financially the right thing by stopping the people from needing to go in. And I'd like to see us put more meat on that plan. So I'd like to see us all work together to make that more of a reality, and I'd be happy to work with both the department and the parents and the legislature in doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness, please.
Steve Miller, Tierra del Sol Foundation. I bring greetings from Southern California, Madam Chair. I listened with great empathy and pain to each of the family members talking about their loved one in the developmental center. I couldn't help but recognize that for every one of those stories, there's at least 100, if not 1,000, people with similar stories who are making it somehow in the community system now. Each of their families anguishes over the kind of staff that are there and how frequently those faces change. In my organization that has a turnover rate of 30 to 50% on an annual basis, I promise you, serving people with the same types of disabilities. Our organization was really founded as part of the deinstitutionalization movement in 1971. Mm-hmm. The reason why we can't serve those people now and they're going back into the institutions is because the legislature and the administration successively have destabilized the community system. That 4.25% will not fix it, but failing to restore that 4.25%, we are failing. That will seal our death warrant. We need that to start the healing process. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Hi, I'm Lisa Giraldi, and I'm here with Sally, Guy, Dawn, and Eric, and we're pooling our time. We're with PDS from Marin County, and I just want to tell you that getting here and sitting through this whole meeting has been really, really difficult. It's the first time I've ever done it, and I don't know if I'll have the energy to do it again. So thank you, but thanks for the opportunity to speak. So when I was in elementary school, at an age when other children dreamed of being firemen or astronauts, I dreamed of helping people with developmental disabilities. Because of my Aunt Lena, who had Down syndrome and was institutionalized, I wanted nothing more in my life than to help my aunt and people like her enjoy the opportunities of life that the rest of us take for granted. I created PDS, which is the program I run. Then it helps people like Eric, Dawn, Guy, and Sally maintain jobs and participate in everyday life in the community. Eric, as an example, will tell you that he works at Costco. He's worked there for 15 years, and he makes $18.30 an hour. Because of the limited state funding, my staff who support Eric at his job make less than $12 per hour. I've been running PDS for 22 years now, and I'm afraid that it's becoming nearly impossible for me to continue following my dream. The 4.25% cut has had devastating effects on my ability to continue doing what I love. I spend an inordinate amount of time fundraising and managing finances to keep this program afloat. There's been many times when I've almost not made payroll, and there have been times when I've considered shutting down the program because we have no equity. I cannot serve people as well, especially as they age and especially as they develop behavioral problems. My staff live below the poverty level, and I've had to reduce their benefits. We've never had retirement benefits for our staff or for myself. We cannot keep up with the cost of living. Our rent's going up, all of our costs are going up, and we cannot keep up. Our landlord doesn't understand that, you know, what our situation is, and it's really, really difficult. Our cars are not in good working order, and we use private vehicles for transportation. I have applied for a health and safety waiver, and I was denied.
Going to have to ask that you start to wrap up, please.
Okay. If PDS were to close because of our budget cuts, these guys would not be able to keep working. You've heard the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a village to help these guys stay employed. Please show that you value their lives and their jobs, and allow the 4.25% cut to sunset.
Thank you for your testimony, and thank all of you for joining us today. Next witness, please.
Thank you.
Okay, my name is Eric Siamonazo. I work for Costco 15 years. Thank you, bye.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your work.
My name is Guy, and I have worked at the Marin Red Pool for 1 year. I make $8.50 per hour. I live in my own home with supported living services. And
go ahead.
And please stop the budget cuts. All right, thank you.
Thank you for being here, and congratulations on your achievements.
I'm Sally Harrison, and I work at Woodland Market. I've been there for a year, 2 years, and I make $8.50 an hour. I also live in supported living. Please stop the budget cuts.
Hi, Don Mangerbang, and I work at Old Navy. I make $9.98. I live independent with independent living supported living, and same with what everybody else said.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today. Next witness.
Hi, my name is Carol McKinney, and I'm with the California Supported Living Network. And we were invited to participate in the stakeholder process, and we appreciated the opportunity and also the hard work that DDS put into it. I want to talk about two issues. One, the 4.25% reduction that it's ready to sunset. CSLNC is a real disconnect. We develop creative, innovative, cost-effective programs in the community. We move people from DCs into those programs. We deflect people from going into the DCs, and we also provide those services to people who would never go into the DC. And then scenarios are created that destabilize what we've done in the community. This 4.25% reduction, as well as years of freezes, has just done that. It is destabilizing the community. We can get the waiver for people's supports, but we can't get a waiver when our infrastructures are crumbling. So we think it's critical that the 4.25% sunset. The second thing I want to speak about is the independent assessor. It has a $3 million price tag. It's projected to save $11 million. Most regional centers haven't had the opportunity to get it up and running. It takes a while to get the requests for proposals out there, to find the providers who won't have a conflict of interest, and then to get it going. And so the money hasn't been spent. The money hasn't been saved. We think if we take it out of the professional independent assessor role and put it into the planning team, it can be done annually. It can, instead of every 3 years in the IPP. It can be done with everybody instead of just the people who are 125% over the average. And it can start happening now. We don't have to wait for those regional centers to get going. We can take the components that's in law now that tells the assessor which components to look at and tell the planning team to do that very same thing. And we can start saving the money earlier, and we think that would be more beneficial, and it would put it back where it belongs. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next witness.
Tim Hornbecker, a former CEO for the Arc of San Francisco, and since retiring, I've come back to work with Tony with the Arc of California as the Director of Community Advocacy. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the impact of sunsetting the 4.25% payment reduction. What that means for the Arc of San Francisco, for example, that's a minus $300,000 this last year that they lost. That equals about $1.15 per hour wage increase to staff that they could do if they didn't have to keep paying that. And they have SEIU 10-to-1 union negotiations right now that they're going through. So what are they going to be able to do? The other thing is that regional centers, in order to save money, some have pushed off payments from the 10th of the month to the 13th of the month. Now, when you're a large organization like that and have a $250,000 payroll twice a month, that means that now the money's not coming in till after you have to have the money to ADP, so they have to take a loan out for $250,000. I thought maybe that was only the Arc of San Francisco. The Arc of Bakersfield is now using their reserve monies, and the Arc of Alameda is also using their reserve monies just to make payroll. So when Terry talked about reaching people tapping out, they certainly have. So they really are at a critical point. I really do suggest that be sunset. And then you have distributed to you the Keep the Lanterman Promise survey. If you haven't received it, I'll make sure you get it. And in that survey, I'm a volunteer for them. Chad Carlock, a volunteer attorney, had to leave. He couldn't testify today, but he left that. 10% of the providers that were surveyed of the 250, that's 1,000 vendorized codes of service code, 10% said they would be going out of business within 1 year. 33% said they had to close or consolidate services just to keep open. 75% have frozen or cut wages and benefits over the last 3 years. And finally, 60% have their quality of programs impacted by the unpaid holidays or furlough days. Please, we need to stop the furlough days. We need to stop that impact. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for the information you provided us. Just doing a time check here. We'll afford each witness up to 2 minutes in respect for the long line of folks who do want to have a chance to make a comment. If you're able to abbreviate or support what somebody else has said, we'd appreciate that as well, out of respect to maximizing everyone's opportunity. Thank you.
Evelyn Abu Hassan with Disability Rights California. I will keep my comments brief as I've submitted written testimony. We are concerned about the $200 million reduction. This is on top of previous reductions in prior years that total almost $1 billion in general fund reductions. We think that serious consideration needs to be given to either sunsetting the 4.25% rate reduction to providers or reducing that rate reduction. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Monning. Next witness, 2 minutes.
Madam Chair, members, Dwight Hanson on behalf of the California Disability Services Association. We also support the sunset, obviously, of the 4.25%. We also think that additional funding into supported living makes a lot of sense. One of the reasons we push so hard on the closure is there are better options, but when we cut the supported living program and then ask why do people wash in, I think the answer is self-evident here. We don't need 5-bedroom homes with no pools if you have supported living. You have other options available to you. The one thing I would say to you, though, is we take very seriously this recession. For those of us that have been in the system a long time, it started in 1998. That's when the first rate freezes occurred, not in 2008. So in essence, we've been doing this for a very long time. We have always brought forward to you alternatives, trying to meet the numbers that you need to meet. We've done that again this year, keeping these cuts not as far away from people with disabilities this year, but absolutely not to disabilities. They have absolutely gone to direct services in the last 2 or 3 years. So we have that list. We look forward to working with your committee on this issue. We think we can get most of the way to $200 million with alternatives that avoid the kind of cuts we've experienced, and we look forward to working with you on that. Thank you.
Can you make sure that before you leave today, budget staff has your list?
Absolutely, we will.
I'm Zach Miller, president of South Area People First. And what People First means, that means we're disability second, but people first are first. We're people first. That's what it means. So I want to say that I'm explaining that I'm just like everybody else. I go to Safeway and buy my groceries. I go to Walmart. I go to Starbucks and buy a $5 cup of coffee. So, and I'm on the Alta board. I'm on the client CSC. I represent 17,000 individuals of Alta, and including myself, and we make recommendations to the Alta board. So I recommend to you that you consider the budget for people with disabilities, and that you do try to keep as far away as possible from us and stuff, and try to look at other solutions. And about the 22-year-old man that was murdered in Sunnyvale, that was really sad, but I want you to know that my organization, Asan Sacramento Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, is doing a candlelight vigil on Friday night here at the Capitol at 13L at 5:30 to represent that man, that young man, and 17 whatever other individuals that have been murdered by people with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony and for sharing that information with us about the vigil. Thank you. Next witness, 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Diane Rose, and I'm here to represent the California Respite Association. Family support programs and respite in particular have taken a huge hit over the last few years. When it was originally decided that need to make some adjustments, we thought we're going to save $5 million, ended up saving $50 million. That's how much big the first cut was. But we have family cost participation. The 0 to 3-year-olds were taken from our service, and the 4.25 and the rate freezes. Many of our agencies are teetering, have had to go to a group to join someone else to continue. We are on the verge. We want the 4.25 to go. We need that. And on top of that, I want to tell you, I am a director of a respite agency and a mom. My agency, I have a worker who's worked for me for 25 years. She makes $12.33 an hour. That's all we could ever afford to pay. My rate that I get is $17.17 an hour. You go and work for $12 and some change for the rest of your life. We just don't have any way to move up. And, that 4.25 may not make all the difference, but it's certainly going to make some difference. And I wanted one more statement. As a mom, my 34-year-old daughter that lives with me, no one has ever come to me and said, because of these budget cuts, we need to look and see how that's affecting her. I'm sorry, I'm just a little envious of people who get that.
Thank you very much. Next witness, please.
Hi, my name is Helen, and this is Sherry. Now, Sherry put a letter together about how she feels about the budget cut. Okay, you want me to read it? So the budget cut is affecting me because I am unable to go to camp in August. I feel that it is unfair that you cut the budget from people that have developmental disabilities. We cannot afford another budget cut. I am afraid that another cut would cause my day program to close, and I may lose my health benefits. I am also afraid that my peers may lose their place of residence. That makes me feel angry because you don't think of me as an equal person, because you are not treating us like you would people without disabilities. I would like it if you come up with a new strategy that could save our budget, Sherry. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Sherry. High five from up here, too. Next witness, please. 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, or maybe good evening.
I'm Nancy Batterman. I'm the CEO of Employment and Community Options, and we provide services to 1,200 people in a 4-county region across California. And I'm also the chairperson of the California Disability Services Association Public Policy Committee. Please allow the 4.25% rate reduction to sunset. This is critical for all of us in the community to continue to provide quality services in the community. I've been at Employment and Community Options for 26 years, and in 2009, when the initial rate cut was started, for the first time in the history of our company, we laid off people. 13 people we laid off. I would really like to bring 5 of those people back, job developers, because as our name says, Employment and Community Options, we provide employment opportunities. But we can't afford to do that without the 4.25% back. And that is in addition to cuts that will continue with the mandated holidays and also with the half-day, full-day billing. Those are essential cuts to our program, so those continue. Also, I'd like to correctly characterize the stakeholder process. There was limited attendance. California Disability Services Association, which represents 120 agencies across the state, was only allowed 3 representatives, and we had to share 2 of those representatives with 2 other organizations. So I was unable to attend, even though I would have liked to, and provide services in 4 counties. We would have also liked there to have been more collaboration and discussion, but it was rather just people sharing information and that being taken back. There wasn't really discussion on the topics, and we weren't given any indication of where things were support or any numbers are given at any point. We do support the increase in federal funding with the Medicaid waiver, and as providers, we are willing to do whatever it takes to assist the department and the regional centers to put more people on the waiver, because we do understand how critical that is, and that's where we could really find some of that $200 million in savings. And lastly, I would just like to say, please let the 4.25% beautifully sunset.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Sorry to have to do this again, Ms. Mitchell. Again, I will do my best. I want to start by telling a small story that I told in the Senate hearing on Monday, and that was I was on a website for a company called Project Ride. They are a recreational and therapeutic horse riding program in Elk Grove and Assemblywoman Huber's district. And for those who are interested in that program, the only thing they can let you do is get on their waiting list. You cannot, they have no more funding sources. The only people who can get services from them are people who pay out of pocket. And they lost all of their funding from the Department of Developmental Services and the regional centers. So that's another reason why we need to see the 4.25% cut sunset. The other thing is when it comes to educational services, I would like to get my GED and move forward in my education, but under the generic resources that are required, I would have, that would not work for me because of my limited the problems that I have, and I have to be taught at a level that I can understand. Finally, one person that sat next to me was from Progressive Employment Concepts, and I told her about the cumbersome committees that the regional centers have had to form since the 2009-10 budget trailer bill. And those committees are so cumbersome, they waste a whole lot of time, and they have it wastes not only time but resources. And if a consumer wants something, even if the service coordinator agrees that the consumer needs or wants something, they have to go through this deviant, rigorous process. And finally, the one thing I forgot to say when I was last up here, the California School for the Blind, which, by the way, is in Mr. Wykowski's district, is like a DC with a twist. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
The $200 million is too much, and I'm just trying to oppose if there's a way we can make it not happen. Yeah.
The $200 million is too much, and I was just wondering if there was a way that we could make it not happen.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Next witness, please.
Hello, I am Stephanie, and I'm here today to say that enough is enough. The continued cuts to the DD system, including the services I receive, has already been cut to the bone. With the services I receive, I am able to live independently and give back to the community. Please don't continue to cut the services that I need to live happily. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next witness, please. 2 minutes.
My name is Jamie Davis. I'm the Executive Director of Marin Ventures in San Rafael. My friend here is John Monroe. He's a participant in our program, which is a day program serving about 104 people with developmental disabilities. About a third of our clients are medically fragile with complex care needs, and the trip here today would have been too strenuous for them. 80% of our participants do not communicate primarily through speaking. Many of them have been served previously in developmental centers. Most of them rely on paid providers to advocate for them because their parents are deceased or just not around. I hope to speak persuasively on their behalf today. John's lived in his community-based ICF for 26 years. I know that because I've known him that long. It's not only people in developmental centers who have known people a long time. The impact to our program from the cuts in recent years have meant that John does not have the same quality of care and teaching that he had in the 90s before the rate freezes and cuts to the ICF programs. Due to the rate freezes, forced closure days, half-day billing, and the 4.25% discount on payments enacted more recently, we've had to cut staff benefits, lay off positions, and have not been able to implement raises for more experienced staff. While the developmental center staff got a 5% increase in January, my staff have lost their benefits. Our staff turnover has increased. This impacts John directly. He has a less stable environment and a lower quality of care, although we always try to do more with less, as I have been doing in this field for 25 years. We have fixed costs tied to overhead, just like the developmental centers. My rent's not going down next year. Surprise. The governor's budget sunsets the 4.25% rate cut for purchase of services. It is critical for this to occur. There are savings that can be found that have no harm to John and others. Hold the developmental centers to the per-person cost at current levels. Community costs increase just like the developmental centers. Our staff are paying a lot more to get to work these days. Develop a timeline for closure of the developmental centers. They are costly and archaic. Maximize our federal dollar waivers. John and the other participants in our program are our most vulnerable, marginalized, and voiceless citizens. Please keep their needs a primary consideration. Thank you.
I'm going to try to be a professional testifier here. My name is Jackie Dillard-Foss. I'm with the California Supported Living Network and also the CEO of the STEP program. There was a couple of things I wanted to talk about. One was the independent assessor. We keep hearing these are for the most expensive. I want the panel to understand the number. If you want to qualify for an independent assessment, your cost needs to be about $4,583.33 per month. I want you to put that in comparison to a person in a developmental center at $323,000. So for $4,583, you too can qualify for an independent assessment at a cost of $3 million that has no direct impact. I'm pretty passionate about the independent assessment because many of the people that I have supported and have chosen my agency I've known for 20 plus years. And yet I'm going to have a stranger come in and work with me to tell me. It still doesn't make sense. It's another bureaucratic layer. We can get rid of it. We can put it back in the planning team. We can keep to the Lanterman Promise, and we need to really focus in on that Lanterman Promise. There's been so much dwindled away. One piece, can we try to keep the planning team and that integrity in place? The second part is, and we've been talking with the director, and I appreciate her passion on the CFCO. If we can figure out the community first choice option and the 1915K and all the complications, CSLN is willing to work diligently with the department to do whatever we can to figure out how we can make this waiver work. I know when you talk about community first choice option for the people that we support across the state in supported living and independent living, their community first choice option is a home of their own. So I hope that we continue on that one. And also I want to, again, talk about the parity. it was a tough pill to swallow for many of my staff when they hear about a 5% pay increase during these economic times. Their wages have been frozen. There hasn't been wage increases, and this is statewide. So it was tough. I understand contracts and negotiations and all that, but when you talk about a 4.25, our employees are taking that cut day in and day out. So we need to really recognize when we make those agreements, and I don't put that on the department, I put that on a negotiation. So it's a tough one. So I just want to talk about the independent assessor, $3 million, the 1915K, and we have to see, I'm not going to sing Sunrise Sunset, I already sang it enough during the stakeholder process, but we need to see that sunset happen. So thank you. And now I'm going to reverse my role and be a voice interpreter. I want you to know I work at STEP. I joined in 2003. Oh, my name, it's Jerome. My last name is Nash. Jerome worked, but he's learned a lot. At first they were following, and now more independent. He also has a sweetheart. Oh yeah, no more Hooters. He has a sweetheart now. Yes. Now we go to Buffalo. Now we go to Buffalo Wild Wings. Buffalo Wild Wings. No more Hooters. Jerome was also he started in the developmental center system. He met his girlfriend during that time when they actually had the opportunity to meet with you, Assemblymember Mitchell. So his girlfriend and him met at that. So you're a matchmaker. So thank you for being a matchmaker. eharmony.com, Holly Mitchell style. So I appreciate it, and Jerome appreciates it. There's the interpreter. Jerome actually started in the developmental center system at the age of 14, from the age of 14 to the age of 31. He was at Porterville in the secured treatment program. When Jerome would come to visit STEP, he came with 2 security guards every single time he came to STEP. On the day Jerome was started in supported living, the 2 security guards came with Jerome and left and never saw him again. So I want to be really clear. There has not been a developmental center staff out of all the 30 people we support that have ever come back to visit. I wish they would. We would bring the person to them. Not one. In the 30 individuals, not one developmental center staff. It breaks my heart to think that Jerome was in this system for so long and nobody comes to visit. So this man will be a part of my life because he is my family. That doesn't happen very often, but this is when Jackie cries sometimes, so I'm not going to do it this time because Jerome gets me every time. He's been through a hell of a lot, and I will fight to the death for my friend Jerome. But I just think, I know my friend Jerome. He has 3 to 8, Monday through Friday. That's it. That's all the staff he has. No one on the weekend. Well, because the girlfriend comes over, but we won't talk about that. So I just wanted people to understand, this is the face of a developmental center person in a secured treatment program in an unlicensed, unregulated supported living arrangement. So there was a little offense to that part of it because we do have APS, we have SARs, we have the regional center. So I take a lot of pride in what supported living does across the state. So that's all I have to say. I think I took 2 minutes plus, but I'm sorry. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, and thanks to Jerome again. Next witness, 2 minutes, please.
Hi, my name's Kiera. I'm a very independent person, but it didn't start out that way. 23 years ago today, I was born, told I would never walk, talk, hold my head up, and I would drool all over the place. I was told I should be put in an institution and forgotten about. But my grandma did not let that happen. And because of her, I am where I am today. Unfortunately, due to all the budget cuts that have happened in the past couple of years, I am forced to lose some of that independence because my chair has been broken time and time again, and it takes 3 to 6 months to get it fixed every time. The reason I'm here today, because my friend happened to have a backup chair, which is also deemed unsafe. It is broken and stops whenever it feels like it. But I use it because this is an important thing, and it needs to be stopped. The cuts are too much.
Thank you for spending your birthday with us. It was an important message for us all to hear. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Rocio Smith, and I'm here speaking on behalf of the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. And I knew it was her birthday, and I was going to ask everybody to wish her happy birthday, but she told us all. And the system cannot take any more cuts. And it cannot take any more cuts because of what it does to people like Kira and like Audra and like everybody who comes and testifies, and those that don't, those that call us on the phone because they're very afraid because their program is going to shut down, because the anxiety that all these cuts have caused on people is unreal, and it's real. So we cannot take any more cuts. As a matter of fact, we need to put money back in. We need to sunset the 4.25%. We have to work on making whole the people who day in and day out serve people with developmental disabilities. And I had my cheat sheet notes and I forgot. What else do I? Okay. We need to allow the system more flexibility. Self-directed services need to become a reality. We need to remember that supported living, that service started when the Caulfield settlement made it possible, and therefore to think that people in developmental centers are not hearing about a real option like we have heard right now, it makes me, it shouldn't be that way. It is a real option for people. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next witness.
Hi there. My name is Erin Gabrielson. I am the program support manager for the STEP program here in Sacramento. With the work that I do, I send out an annual, what we call personalized service program report on people every month. I also send a quarterly program or quarterly progress report every month, and then a monthly mini medical report every month on every single person that we support in our company. So I can't help but think about the numbers that have been thrown out today, and $3 million on an independent assessor that does not know the people that we support, when my company and the people in my company have worked with these people for, like Jackie said, 20 years, 5, 10 plus years. They're in those homes. So I don't understand how spending another $3 million is good for the budget or the quality of service. Another number that just does not make sense to me is the 300,000+ for people getting services in developmental centers, when I see it done successfully in the community for a fraction of the price, and that's including 2-to-1 staffing. That's including awake overnights. And in that, they get to choose those doctors that you guys say that we need to pay for in the developmental centers. They get to choose the apartments or the homes that they live in. They get to choose the staff that work with them for a fraction of the cost. So these numbers don't make sense. Let's think about this when we're deciding to make these cuts. Thank you.
I'm Chester. I'm a registered voter. I've been around group homes since I was a little kid, and I know every little I know every loophole, and I know every little background, and I know every lie. I know everybody's face. All I'm saying is, if you guys cut all these people benefits and their cuts, and you see all these people over here and fighting for their belief, why cut? Why do all this? And I have been a place where a building and got locked up, and I know how it feels. And those institutions need to be closed down right away, and that'll save a lot of money.
Hi, my name's Gary Hammond. I'm I'm registered to vote. I was here on Monday, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the people that have had the unfortunacy not to have visitors, and also the budget cut, and it could be very, very devastating to most of the people in not only here but the entire state. And if there were ways to go around it to trim it just at the right part without, I know they can't avoid the budget cut, but if we can find an easier way to go around it, I think people would be most happy, and we could open the doors more to people that wouldn't, and also the visiting rights should be, if people who don't have visits, it would be really nice if somebody opened the door and said, you know, we're going to invite more people to come to see her and more staffing, general staffing. I think that's so important, especially now that it's hard times getting jobs and the different businesses that have been affected by the budget.
Hi, my name is Lynn Frampton. I'm a medical case manager at Strategies to Empower People. First and foremost, I want to say you need to sunset the 4.5 before I go off and meander on something else. But I feel for you, because if you stick to that the way that it's written, you're going to have to go after education. The money has to come from somewhere, and you're going to have to go after education. And those cats are organized. I don't know if you know about them yet, but the teachers and the parents and everybody, they're really organized, and they're going to come guns blazing. You know, we're not that organized. We're getting more organized. We're quiet, though, and so we're an easy target. But it's unethical, and you know it's unethical, and we're hanging on by a thread. I have a solution, though, to how to, close down the state developmental centers. That will save a lot of money. If you did some legislation where you told everybody that worked in there that when they came out to the private sector, they could keep their pensions and they could keep the wages that they make there, those guys would be packed and ready to move tomorrow. But that's not going to happen, because out here in the real world, when I hire someone, maybe a nursing student, maybe a psychology student, I have to offer her $10.50 an hour, because most of it's IHSS wages. Because in SLS, we have to use generic resources. They're not going to come out to work with us. They are the people that should be coming out with them. But they're not going to, because we can never meet a brand new psych tech just on the floor today making $26 an hour. That's the reality. Check it out. Go see the websites. That's the reality. I have to deal with reality. So I'm just asking you, this system cannot handle anymore. So sunset the 4.25.
Thank you very much. Next witness, please.
Hi, my name is Mike Miller, and it's crazy. It says it's crazy not to do away with this budget cut, to retire the 4.5 million budget. So he would like to see the budget retired, sunset, as everybody's saying. He's never lived in a group home or a state institution. He's lived with his family, and they did the best they can, or the best that they could, and then he came to STEP about 5 or 6 years ago, and he's very happy. He's made a lot of friends. He's on Facebook. He has a movie page, Movies with Mike, that he invites people to go to movies with him. He's gone out and done stuff that he hasn't had the opportunity before when he's living at home. So, anything else? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony. Next witness.
My name is Doug Pascover, and I'm here today to represent J. Nolan Community Services to express that the process of changing policy, even in pursuit of a more cost-effective system, needs to happen through a slower process and an ongoing one, and we would like your support in doing that, working with the department to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness, please.
Yes, my name is Carl Weedman. I'm a personal service attendant at the Strategies to Empower People. I hope you would vote on this, the onset of the 4.25 budget. As I with person be here today for him. We just got a house here, a roommate here about 5 months ago, and he's very happy. And with the things he wants to do, and and the goals he wants to achieve in his life. So I would hope it's about being heart-wise and being heart-wise always, and in a home in their home, and they do what they want to do in their life. And I hope you would not the 4.25 budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Eileen Ritchie, the Association of Regional Center Agencies. I want to commend the department for the renewal of the waiver. Terry has been extremely aggressive in pursuing federal funds, and the regional centers work in partnership with the department in accessing and maintaining those federal funds at the local level. Today I'm here to urge you to support the sunset of the 4.25% for both operations and purchase of service. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Stacy Sasson, and I'm proud to represent the agency that I have the privilege to work for, Strategies to Empower People. And I'm here obviously in support of the sunsetting of the 4.25%, and also to ask you to please, 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 at all costs, keep the $200 million in cuts away from direct services. You heard Lynn Frampton, my coworker, speak about the thread that we're hanging on by, and that thread is tattered and frayed, and we're just barely hanging on. We've brought to you numerous viable options to find cost savings, from the waiver to getting rid of those independent assessments that are ludicrous, to closing the DCs or putting a moratorium on any further admits to the DCs. And to say that we have to have new admits to the DCs is just another ludicrous statement, because you met Jerome, who was behind the fence at Porterville. He's thriving out in the community, was told he would never be able to thrive out in the community. He's proving everybody wrong, and he's one of numerous stories that we have. I'd also like to ask, I know Ms. Delgadillo spoke about increases that happened in community-based organizations. I've not seen those increases, and when I hear this young lady that spoke about a 20-plus year employee that she's got that's working for $12.33 an hour, I don't think many of us are seeing it. So I'd like to know where those increases are happening. And I'd also like to say that the people that we support deserve better. The people that are doing the work to support those people in the community deserve better. And I'd like to ask you to please, please, please sunset the 4.25% and keep the $200 million away from direct services. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Madam Chair, members. I'm Greg DeGier with the ARC and United Cerebral Palsy in California. There are four categories of things we're asking you for this year. I guess that's part of the risk of doing as well for us as you did last year, that we think it's possible, and here we are back asking for more. We think it's possible too. I'm going to start with the most audacious one. We want to restore the cut that was made in 2009 to the Early Start program. This is the program for the you're smiling. It can be done. This is the program for at-risk babies and infants. It's they're little children who are suffering now for lack of it, and it's going to cost the state more in the long run. We wouldn't have said this were it not for the compromise that the governor reached on the tax initiative, which, if the voters pass it, will provide some more general fund money. And we want some of it to begin restoring the very worst of the cuts that have been made. in the DD system. We do support savings that do no harm to consumers. We've made suggestions. We'll flesh them out and get them to your staff that we think will. There's a lot of money there. Frankly, though, we're skeptical that there's $200 million there. That's not a magic number. There's a number that the Department of Finance or somebody pulled out of the air, I guess. And we are asking you to reject any cuts beyond those that will do no harm. If we can save $75 million or $100 million or $125 million, let's do it without hurting people, and let's reject the rest, as I know the Assembly has been looking at doing with other areas, some of which affect our people. And thank you for that. And last, and not only least, but not least, but most important is, of course, we support sunsetting the 2.25%, 4.25% rate cut. Not part of it, all of it. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for having me today. My name is Michelle Hyde, and I'm representing the Southern California Consortium for Behavior Analysis. We represent 47 vendors who provide behavioral services to children and adults who are regional center consumers. I'm also a parent of an 11-year-old who has benefited from behavioral services provided to him, and to echo the man before me, also was able to access regional center early start services as an at-risk child who was 2 when he started into the program. At the time when he started, he did not speak. He had no communication, very little ability to navigate his day independently, and really had a lot of behaviors that were very out of control. Today at 11, through behavioral services and early intervention, he is now receiving no support other than case management from the regional center due to the services that he provided, and he's fully included, not receiving any more services in the school besides his IEP team meets yearly just to talk about how great he's doing. So he's a case of real success through early intervention and through behavioral services. And the behavioral service vendors, we cannot take any more cuts to our services. It is going to directly affect the services that are provided to the children and the adults that we serve. We've had rate freezes. We've had all of those things that you've already heard about. But in addition, things that people haven't talked about today is the audit requirements that are going to take funds directly away from training and staff support and salaries, and we have to now pay an accounting firm to do this very extensive audit. We also have to manage the 15% restriction on administrative costs when we have to pay payroll. We have to have human resources to support our employees. There's things that we cannot do without. We have to have somebody to answer the phones so that when service coordinators call us, we have somebody to address those concerns right away. Those all go to the 15%. So with all of these restrictions, we are really scraping by trying to figure out how to run our business and provide these necessary supports. And I'm sure you guys have seen other agencies close because they cannot manage this anymore.
10 seconds.
In addition, we're also subject to Title 17 regulations that are also very difficult for us to meet. In fact, mostly for Service Code 612 and 615, we are unable to meet those. So I appreciate your time. I'd like to submit what I have in writing as well. Thank you.
Final witness, please.
Hi, my name is Andy Pereira, and I'm a service provider from Santa Cruz, and have been working in this field for 30 years. Before I say what I wanted to say, I was hijacked by a friend, Doug, who forgot to say that the audits that are coming disproportionately, I think, affect ILS and respite providers, small providers, at what for many of us is a tremendous cost, and would like to see if that can be delayed until we find a more cost-effective way to achieve the same sort of transparency. Good enough? What I wanted to say was that I believe the DD service system has a tremendous amount of need. I don't believe that money is the major one. I believe the service system needs significant ongoing system reform to become more effective, far more effective than it currently is, and far more responsive to the needs of the developmentally disabled than it currently is. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Before we move on to issue 4 and 5, I just want to re-engage the LAO. We've heard any number of examples from members of the public, questions around the independent assessments, expediting closure of Lanterman, the notion of rejecting cuts that will do harm, audit requirements to Title 17 regs. Are those areas that you gave any review or consideration to?
So there were 5 that you just named off?
That was just based on the last 4 or 5 people who gave public testimony. I guess my point is, we, the legislature, look to you to help us come up with analysis-based kind of options, and really, frankly, to hear that the only recommendation that you had was to not sunset the rate cut was a little disappointing. And so my question is, did you consider anything else?
Well, we are waiting for the department to provide additional information on how they're going to achieve the $100 million in savings. That they just put out a list earlier this week, but we haven't had an opportunity to do a review of that.
Okay.
And then we're also looking at the department is going to try and achieve additional savings. We don't have the detail on that. What they're talking about is trying to achieve the majority of it through by drawing down additional federal funds. If I understand some of the proposals that they have correctly, and we think that's probably the best route that we could achieve these savings, is to draw down the additional federal funds, because that means we're achieving the savings without having to affect the consumers. So we're waiting for more detailed information on that so that we can tell you whether we think those savings are achievable. Those are our best options for achieving savings in this program, we think. The savings from the provider rate reduction, we're recommending that you consider that as an option if we're unable to achieve identify savings in other areas that they're looking at right now. So we recommend that you consider that. And then we are looking at some of the other issues that people have raised. And if you could go back through the 5 that you named off, I could comment on each of those if you'd like.
I'll give you the list.
Okay.
But it was just what you heard. You've been here through public testimony. Again, it was the independent assessments that was mentioned repeatedly. Again, the whole notion of expediting closure of Lanterman, the audit requirements. The second to last witness talked about the Title 17 regs, which I'm not familiar with, so she said she was going to provide information. So that's just, again, based on the last half dozen or so members of the public who commented. So
some of those
hope to get some additional information as soon as you get it from the department. Is that post may revise?
Well, some of those issues are issues that we have been looking into recently. For example, the audit requirements are an area that we've looked at. Another area that we've been looking at is the regulatory environment for providers for regional centers. We don't have any recommendations on that as of yet, but that's another area that we've been looking at recently.
That's helpful. Thank you. Any questions from the committee on issue 3? Ms. Grove.
Sorry again. I'm back. So I guess this is issue. I apologize. So issue 3. I do have a question on the audits that were addressed just a few minutes ago. I noticed that $250,000 in revenue from the department secured financial detailed audits. That's a mandate. And these audits, I know I pay for a private audit over my line of credit in my business, and it costs anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 a year. When you're asking the people that are in direct delivery of services, I'm talking about the regional centers and the people that deal with consumers on a daily basis, hand to hand, not pushing paper or anything like that, but hand-to-hand direct delivery of services, that $10,000, along with the cut that they sustained a few years ago, is so impactful. What do you get from these reports? Is it substantially something that makes you do your job better or your department's job better? And why is that cost being imposed on the people that offer direct delivery of services? That's day camps. I see it as like, instead of paying for an audit, I'd rather have somebody go to a day camp. Instead of paying for an audit, I'd rather have somebody have after an adult program or something after school services, or I don't know, a bike riding class or something.
Horse riding.
Horse riding. Yeah. I have horses. They love horses when they come out to my place. Something. Why pay for an audit when that interferes directly with direct delivery of services?
Thank you, Assemblymember Grove. Actually, the audits came last year through the budget process, but it came following an audit that was done by the State Bureau of State Audits, who had looked into a number of issues in the regional center system, including issues of concern with some providers and how they delivered services. The audit requirement came in Trailer Bill last March. The audit requirement adopted by the legislature had two components. Number one, it said that if you make over $250,000 in money from the regional center system, you have to get a review, a fiscal review. And if you make more than $500,000, you need to get an audit. Actually, since that time, since July, we've had 10 whistleblower complaints having to do with providers, and providers where we've gone in and done audits and had significant concerns. Millions of dollars outstanding right now. And the Bureau of State Audit found concerns as well. There are close to 60,000 providers. Many of them are family members. This doesn't impact them, but there are about 35,000 providers that do provide services. The number actually, though, that are impacted by the audits, 791 providers of the 35,000 are impacted by the $250,000 limit for a review, and 1,201 are making over $500,000 out of the 35,000 providers we have.
They're making over that. You're not saying that they're making.
They're
that
receiving
much money.
over $500,000.
They're receiving it, but
Correct.
they mostly will spend that in direct client services. Services.
Correct.
They don't make $500,000.
Correct. They're receiving. They're receiving over $500,000. So that was 1,201 businesses that would need to do an actual audit. The audits actually come into the regional centers, and then we are notified if that is a qualified audit, meaning there are problems in the audit. And we also are notified, as I mentioned, through contact directly. We've had a number of very significant audits recently, and you've probably read about a provider that recently closed when we began the audit. So there have been concerns. There are outstanding recoveries right now. One of the issues we did talk about in the Senate with some of the small providers is maybe looking at, if you have a clean audit, not having to get one for a few years, like putting in a grace period in between, so that if you do get a clean audit, then we know that you have all your systems in place. So that's one of the things that we talked about in the Senate on Monday as well.
As well as looking at programs that have been deficient or had been on probation or whatever the appropriate term is for an extended period of time, and taking action on those agencies more quickly.
So the $100 million adjustment that we're all looking at, expecting may revise, the LAO's offices, you provide them a letter. How much of that $100 million is going to go to direct delivery of services?
Actually, the $100 million is the next topic in the agenda.
Okay.
I've not yet gone over, and none of it impacts direct services.
None of it at all?
No, and I can go through every dollar of what we're doing.
And then based on the statement that you made earlier that community individuals had received raises and increases, I went back, called on my way in between floors and committees. I called several people that are in my district. No community services in my district have received increases, only those that deal with state aid, only the state agency part of it.
Actually, there have been a couple of increases, and we can provide that information. I believe your committee consultant probably also has the information back, and I'd have to check the year. I believe it was 8-9. There was it may have been 7-8, 23% increase to work program supported employment. However, that has been impacted by reductions. There was a 3% increase that happened, and now obviously the 3% is part of the 4.25 payment reduction. All providers got the 3% increase in 7-8? 8-9? I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact year, but we can give you that. It was an across-the-board rate increase.
Okay, so I guess my other question that I have is, main areas of the department's budget for developmental centers, regional centers operations, and purchase services all take reductions or have taken reductions, but like psych techs at the DCs got 5% salary increases. And I could go through every employee at the DCs that get continual salary increases. And again, where we're increasing the cost of salaries and expenses on the bureaucratic level and the state level, but we're cutting daycare programs, horse riding programs, simple drawing programs, things that have a direct impact on client services. It fries me, if you haven't been able to tell, that we cut, when budgets are cut, they go and they affect the individual that I care about. No offense, but you guys are like below that level to me. I don't mean that offensively in any, but I care about the individuals that are sitting out there versus your rate increase since 2006 or the department psych evaluation rate increases since 2006. Those things are, I don't know, number 10 on my list. What affects me and what I do in this committee now, since I've been put on it, is my job is to try to protect the people who are getting cut with services, and that doesn't always mean that we have to raise taxes and increase spending. We just need to look at the way that spending is being spent and address those issues. Like, for instance, the reason why I voted no on that one issue, if my private business had the opportunity to gain $300 million in federal funds, I didn't care if I had to process the paperwork myself. I would obtain that. But apparently it's not going to happen unless you get additional staffing.
It's actually existing staffing. It's just keeping the existing staff, and it's hundreds of thousands of claims.
But the same with us in our assembly offices, using our assembly offices. If Miss Mitchell had to leave and, I don't know, got her budget cut and she had to lose her receptionist or her scheduler or something, somebody else would pick up that slack. Miss Mitchell would not go without that, and neither would I in my private business. I just don't see how, that additional funding could go to direct client services.
Assemblywoman Groven, I know you weren't here at the beginning when we went over and did the overview, but the department headquarters is funded right now and has the same number of staff it had 20 years ago. The budget's gone up 400%, and the committee can attest to the fact we don't come in here and ask for additional positions. These are positions that have been in the department to get $1 billion waiver was approved yesterday. $1 billion waiver. We're in the process of getting a $200 million state plan amendment, the first state in the nation. So, again, without it, I am concerned we won't be able to achieve the savings.
Ms. Grove, you have additional questions because we do need to move on to
I do, and you asked me to come
4
back
and
down.
5, and it's 10 after 5, and
Yes.
folks have been here since 1:30.
Yes, you did ask me to come back down, and I have to go back to that committee, and they're taking another vote. They just sent me a message. So
You can add on.
I appreciate the fact that, not if she adjourns. If she adjourns, can I still add on? Okay. Okay. So I guess you've already answered my questions on there will be no impact with this $100 million reduction.
No, there will not, and I actually can go through it, and we provided it to your consultant this morning as well. She has a written document.
That's part of the problem is that they get it in the morning, I get it 10 minutes before I come to committee.
Let me go through it.
Yeah, and but I have to go back downstairs to the other vote. So I just have some questions. I'm sure they'll give that to me, and but I appreciate you answering my questions that I had. Thank you for your patience, Madam Chair.
We're going to move on to issue item 4, the 11-12 trigger reductions. Why don't we have the sergeant call and see how far they are from shutting down, Ms. Grove? Then you can have a sense of your timing. Okay. Thank you. Sure. Mm-hmm.
So I guess my other comment is that, people in the hallway have stopped me and said things about, the budget cuts, we can't take it. You referenced trailer bills on the last year's budget bill that mandated the audits, those things. You also need to understand that language that comes in those trailer bills very rarely gets to us before it's voted on, especially in the budget session. So like cutting education, transportation, things like that. And what I want to make sure that everybody in this room understands that if they go to leginfo.ca.gov, they can see who voted to make those cuts in these areas. And that's something that people need to be educated on as well.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Grove. We actually, because of the stakeholder process, provided the trailer bill to the legislature and to our stakeholder community in advance, and we try to get it out as quick as we can so we can incorporate changes, and we'll do so again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you continue on with issue number 4.
Madam Chair, the next item in the agenda is the $100 million. I'm sorry, Assemblywoman Grove needs to leave. I do appreciate how challenged it is. So the $100 million is being achieved through a number of things. First of all, in our budget, we currently have money for downsizing of large facilities. This is an issue where if you have a community care facility that exceeds 16 beds, you're not eligible for federal money. Under 2 or 3 years ago, trailer bill language, those programs need to downsize, and we have money in our budget. In the current year, we will not be using all of it. It'll be a savings of $1 million. Secondly, when we have an intermediate care facility that gets licensed but has not yet been certified by Medi-Cal, there has been money in our budget going way back that's called GAP funding that allows for us to cover the non-Medi-Cal costs during that period. We will have $300,000 in savings this year as a result of that. The next is when Medi-Cal eliminated the dental program, we got money in our budget to backfill for that. And because of the delay in implementing the contract with Delta Dental, we have $4.3 million in savings in the current year. The next is related to community placement plan resources. These are 910 resources where the regional centers acquired property they were trying to remodel. They're not going to be able to do it before June 30th when the money expires, so we have $5.1 million returning to us for that purpose. Additionally, we have in the current year additional home and community-based waiver expenditures that have been coming in. Maybe some of the activities in the community of getting more people involved has been helpful. We anticipate $20 million in additional federal money there. We also have, for prior 2 years, actual money that we achieved of an additional $7.3 million and additional waiver in the prior 2 years, spread out $2.3 million in 9-10 and $5 million in 10-11. I mentioned a minute ago the new state plan that we've been working on with the federal government since 2009. And I'm hoping we're getting really close to finalizing it. In the negotiations, they are allowing us to add some services back to 2009, in particular transportation services that were not in the plan until the current year. And so by adding those services back, we'll have a savings of $42 million in additional federal funds coming in once it is approved. And then as the statute allowed for us in terms of achieving our trigger, we are able to account for unexpended regional center contract funds, of which we will have $20 million. The total is $100 million, and the numbers on the federal, we have accounted for the areas where we think that there might be loss in federal funds so that our budget will not have less federal money than is anticipated, so we won't have a general fund impact as a result of that.
Any questions of committee members? Help me understand how the $20 million in unexpended regional center contract funds, how that was achieved.
That is money that from 910, we have a 2-year liquidation period on our expenditures because the regional centers have to pay the service is delivered. At the end of the month, the regional center gets a bill from the provider. They then pay the provider, they bill us, and then we bill the federal government. It's this huge cycle. Mm-hmm. We have 2 years to liquidate, and we have $20 million that's coming back to us of prior money that we don't believe is needed to cover expenditures that are out there.
Okay. Are we going to take public comment on each individual or both together? Both together. Okay. Seeing no questions from committee members, let's roll into issue 5.
That's
the 1213 trigger reductions?
Yes. Yes, as I mentioned before, the department did engage stakeholders in a process to try to identify savings to achieve the $200 million in 1213. We did ask that they discuss a number of things in the meetings in addition to items that they may have. One we talked about in some detail today, which is individuals that are coming into the developmental centers and how we might provide services in the community so they would not need to be placed in the developmental center. Center. We spent a lot of time talking on that, and I think that there was, generally speaking, support to looking at that. There clearly are challenges, as you heard today, in achieving some of that. We also talked with them about savings. When the trigger cut happened, our estimate had not yet been finalized for the current year for the Jan 10 budget, and we had in it savings associated with the Pro Tem's bill on autism, the autism insurance requirement for behavioral services. We anticipate that there'll be roughly $69 million in savings associated with that, and so we are able to credit that to the $200 million, so that was something that we discussed in the work group meetings. So that gets us a little ways down the road. We also talked about emerging technologies, and while there were some ideas, it was not a primary focus of the work group members, but we were trying to see if there were things that we could do using electronics that might be cost effective as we move forward. Clearly, the biggest item of discussion was the elimination of the 4.25% payment reduction. We talked about that at great length as well. The department will be working, and you did hear a couple of other things. Jackie mentioned the 1915K. We have spent time, we actually worked with social services when they originally put in the application, and at the time we thought we would have savings of $1.6 million in the current year that I don't think will be realized. We have accounted for that in the money we're putting forward, so we don't have a hole. But we are working with social services to see whether or not when they amend, once the K gets approved, whether or not there's a way to amend it to maybe get the additional 6% that's offered there for some of the services in our area. So, for example, supported living is not a service that would go into the K because everybody in the state would be then eligible, but there are things supported living does that we believe we can, for lack of a better term, unbundle and then bill appropriately. So we've been working with our counterparts at health, at the agency, and social services to try to figure that out. The next step actually lies with us trying to figure out what that might mean and what services might be included. So that was one of the things we talked about quite a bit. There was a lot of discussion about increasing waiver enrollment and a lot of interest in trying to make sure families understood the waiver and what the benefits were to being on the waiver. So the next steps for us are to actually go through all of that and come up with some proposals that working with the community and working with the various stakeholders and then get those ready to get back to the legislature.
Thank you. I know the Senate asked you to get those back by a date certain, just so we have the opportunity to vet them, to kind of read them twice for me and for the public to have opportunity for input. And so I think they gave you May 1 date.
I think the language, I think, encouraged us to try to do it before May revise, and they were hoping by May 1.
Okay, so ditto from us. Thank you for the plan on $100 million. I got this yesterday, and so we may, after today's conversation and further review, come back and have follow-up questions on this as well, just to dig deeper. Also may follow up just based on some concerns about with regard to the community first choice option, and just really wanting to make sure that departments are having cross-silo conversations.
Yes.
And I don't know if that needs to be elevated to the agency to kind of lay out that mandate. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Great. And I'll follow up with the agency offline on that. Any additional questions of committee members? LAO, any comment on issues 4 or 5?
No comment.
Okay. And open it up for public comment. What I would ask is for folks who haven't taken the opportunity to provide us with your perspective in the first 2 public comment options to feel free to come forward to provide us with your perspective on issues 4 and 5. We wore you down. See what else? I feel sorry for the lady who said, this is my first hearing and it's overwhelming. I don't think I'll come back. Okay, and she's gone. I don't see her, so I'm sorry. Okay, here comes one. We have one taker, Mr. Rollins.
Madam Chair and members, Rick Rollins here on behalf of ARC, Association of Regional Center Agencies, to urge your rejection of the $200 million proposed cut to the system. The system has sustained over $1.3 billion in reductions to purchase of service and operations over the last 3 years. The system's teetering on the edge in many cases of serious fault. And we would really appreciate your consideration of rejecting the $200 million altogether. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Too short for this. Evelyn Abuhazan with Disability Rights California. One of the ways that we, during the stakeholder process, talked about addressing this the new cut this year, or for the budget year, is that to support some alternative placements, community placements for individuals with more significant behavioral challenges as a way of reducing admissions into the developmental centers. We also, in our documents, have identified ways for strengthening the pre-admission review and assessment process so that individuals can be deflected from developmental centers. We provided a lot of detail in the documents that we've given you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Final two witnesses.
If I'm wrong, I know Mark will correct me. With the waiver, from my understanding, is the previous waiver. Congratulations on the renewal of the waiver. That's a good day. It was 95,000 was the cap of how many individuals could be on the waiver. The new waiver is 100,000. And for the 2012-13 budget, you have budgeted for 97,000 people to be on the waiver. And if we can work with our regional center and provider community, anybody above that 97,000 within that budget year would offset some of that $200 million cut, correct? Is that so? That's what you get for being a stalker at 6 stakeholder meetings, is I understood that process. So I guess my piece has always been, and I understand the conversation, as a provider, we are asked to do more with less.
Right.
And I will do that as an administrator. Whatever I have to do, though, if whatever we have to do as a provider community to assist our regional center, who are doing more work with less as well, but if we can work together with less to make more happen, exceeding that $97,000 will take away any cuts to direct services. So I think that if we can target, a lot of providers have talked, if we could all work together to say, June 30th, we're all working together, we hit 2012-13 budget year, that's going to offset. So from my understanding of the math, and if DDS, I think when Mark, I asked in Fresno, beautiful city of Fresno at the last conversation, so anything above that 97,000 could be counted against the 200 million. So I just think we need to put an optional to a mandate. We need to convert from an optional conversation to a mandated conversation. We need to get whoever can be on the waiver, should be on the waiver. So
thank you for that. Last comment.
Sorry, you gave me the opportunity, so I'm going to take it. About the audits, I understand the department has concerns. I understand there's been audits that have been conducted that have resulted in significant discrepancies. I don't know a better word to say that. But it's punishing the entire vendor community for a few bad apples.
Right.
And those of us who are really trying to do our best to provide quality services to the children and adults that we provide, direct service to, that's punishing us, taking away from our ability to continue to provide those really quality services. So there has got to be a better way. Whistleblower complaints, maybe we just need to investigate those folks and create a better process for providers and people in the community, parents, to make those complaints and understand that process. Maybe that needs to be part of the consent process to behavioral services to say, if you have concerns about your provider, this is what you need to do, because we can't punish the entire community, the entire vendor community, for the actions of a few. Also, Title 17 regulations, you mentioned that you're not really aware of them, and I think a lot of people really aren't, but the service codes are stated, those titles that we work under, the service codes that we are trying to provide services under, and they're being enforced to the point where we cannot meet them. So we're being expected to do a lot more, have providers that have all of these staff qualifications and all of this experience. We can't find those people. We can't pay them the rate under the negotiated rates that we have. So it's just impossible all around. So I'd be happy to give you more information, talk more, but there's got to be a better way and a collaborative process. And also the 47 agencies that I represent today, nobody from those 47 agencies was a part of the stakeholder process. And we called and we tried to make phone calls, we tried to write letters to get in that process, and it was like a closed door. And I even tried as a parent, how can I get involved? So there are people willing to help and think creatively, and I do appreciate your creative solution with the audits of maybe we do great one year, we don't have to have them the next year. I think we just need to have more of those creative solutions to resolve these issues. Thank you again very much.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate that. I know title, code, and regulation tragically far too intimately. I just don't know the details of Title 17, so I just want to clarify, but I appreciate that. Thank you very much to the members of the public who took your time to come up and share your perspective with us. It always helps to, in a meaningful way, inform the decisions that we as elected representatives have the responsibility to do. I just want to say that I open every subcommittee generally with a value statement in terms of what our goal is as a subcommittee, in terms of really trying to operate in the realities that we all confront, and that we are California residents and California is broke. And we work very hard to balance that reality with the services I believe we are responsible to provide to California's most vulnerable. I think there is a real balancing act in response to Ms. Grove's statement in terms of where we get the money from. I understand that state departments play an integral role in administering contracts and overseeing audits, and the delivery of services across the state are often delayed and severely impacted when you don't have adequate, informed, engaged personnel by which to partner. And so I wish it were as simple as saying, let's cut off the right arm to make the left arm stronger. We can't. We've got to figure out a way to provide the direct services that Californians are entitled to and need in a holistic, meaningful, helpful way. And that will always be the goal of this subcommittee. With that, thank you very much to the department. Thank you very much to the sergeants who always work very hard to make these committees run very smoothly, to committee staff, and we stand in adjournment.